which is this one. This polygon is just defining a general shape. It has, well, member variables, that number of vertices, and then x coordinate and y coordinate. So basically, what is the position of this shape in the Cartesian coordinates? And then you have only one public method that is called set. And for setting, you want to set simply the number of vertices and the coordinates x and y, right? One thing that maybe it's important to discuss related to the abstraction and encapsulation we discussed before, this set thing and this private thing. I'm not sure if you cover this in a bit of a detail or Shrew, but the point is we want to apply the concepts we have covered on Wednesday in practice, right? So we want to hide the details of our implementation. We want to hide the information within the class and only provide mechanisms to interact with them, right? This is the main concept of abstraction and encapsulation. How to do this? As a general rule of thumb, all your data members should be private, right? What private means? It means they are not accessible by the outside world, right? You only deal with them internally. So if a user tries to use your class and access directly X and Y or any other member, this will not be allowed. Remember, for example, what we have done in structures. In a struct, you define, well, a student, date of birth, or ID, and then when we use it in the main, we say, well, student.id, for example, right? Using the member operator dot, or the arrow if you are using a pointer. This shouldn't generally be allowed. And the reason is now you are breaking the encapsulation concept, right? You allow users to break into the internals of your class. But one question could be, but I want users to use my data, right? I mean, this is why I'm giving them the class, right? The way to do this is to encapsulate it in a way that you only allow them to access it through your own mechanisms. So you give them some keys, right? What are these keys? Usually these are called getters and setters, right? So you will hear this term a lot, and you will see it a lot when you read or listen to something talks about object-oriented programming. A setter and a getter or setters and getters are very common functions in classes or object-oriented programming, and the reason is those are your mechanisms to hand over to a user. A getter, you will allow the user to read data, and the setter allow the user to set data, right? But one important question is, if I'm allowing the user to set data, for example, or get data through this function, how is it different than just setting it directly? It shouldn't be any different. I mean, if I allow the user to set the data, it will just set it, right? Here, for example, I'm having a set function that allows the user to set X. And in that case, I will read X and simply just assign X coordinate into it, right? So why then not make X coordinate public and let the user set it directly? Is there any difference? What do you think? Great, thank you so much. Yeah, that's completely the case. So by having one extra step, which is having a function called set, for example, you put a barrier. And in this barrier, you are basically the policeman there, right? You are the one that is able, for example, to do error checking mechanisms. As your friend said here, if the user inputs something wrong, negative value, for example, or invalid value for X, you are able to check it. So you add extra checks. That's one possibility. The second one is, maybe if you change implementation and you move from X coordinate to radical coordinates, for example, if you don't have setters and you allow the user to set X directly, well, now you break your code because it doesn't work. But through setters, you cannot change the implementation of set to do the mapping from radical to Cartesian and the other way around. So again, there is an additional layer of translation you have control on, right? And this layer gives you the capability to manipulate your internals outside of the user control, please. Yeah, so if it's not private, if it's public, if, for example, I change this private to be public, that means, and I will discuss this in a bit of a detail now. So you didn't cover this with Shrew? So basically, public means anyone. Let me see if I have the, is it here or in the other? So this should be here. here. Okay, so that's the one that we are looking for. You simply have 3 access control specifiers, something called public, protected, and private. If you set a data member to be public, that means anyone can access it. What do we mean by anyone? We mean member functions of that class, or member functions of a child class, or even functions or code outside of the class, like in the main, for example, anything program. So public means it's just open to anyone, including users, right? Private, on the other hand, is the other extreme, which is only member functions of you or friends, which means functions within the class as well, are able to access this private member. Nor childs, or neither childs nor code within the main or the user is able to access. So if I have something as private, a user cannot access this data, and also my child classes of inheritance, as we will see today, will not be able to access it. This seems to be very restricted, right? Because if you want to inherit a class, you might want to also inherit the data members, right? So for that reason, we also have protected, which is something in between. If we define a member to be protected, users through the main cannot access it from outside the class, or other classes cannot access it, but your member functions, as well as childs or member functions of your child, are able to access it, right? So if you look here, derived here means also childs. Well, these are different terminology. So derived classes members and your own members can access it. Public, anyone can access, so it's an all access. While private, it's only your own members can access it. Does this make sense? Yeah. Yeah, you cannot. If something is and we will have an example during today's lecture. So if you define something as private member, and you define or you declare a child class or a derived class from this class, it does not have access to this private data.